Good evening, bienvenue, welcome, mesdames et messieurs. It's a pleasure to have you here joining us for our pre-budget public consultation 2026. This is a consultation session that we started originally doing in 2019, and it's one we've been doing ever since. It's one that was actually the idea of our Director of Finance, our Treasurer, Angelo Marino, who's with me, and who'll be joining me and we'll be sharing the presentation and splitting it about half-half. So first, I'll just give some background on the presentation before we begin. This is something we started doing again back in 2019 because we realized previously we would present the budget in December and we would adopt it. If not that day, then within a day or two we'd be adopting the budget. So we realized even if a resident had the most amazing idea, it was too late. There was no changes that could be made. So we decided to start doing this. Now, good and the bad, we've gotten mixed. We haven't got the hugest or the largest turnouts for these meetings, but I know many people are watching. So many people are here in the audience and people watching at home. And we have quite a few, I'm sure, who will be watching this recorded. So just if you're watching it recorded, you can always reach out to us. You can email me personally at serdeli@cotesaintluc.org, or you can email us at finance@cotesaintluc.org if you have any questions. And I'll just mention one other change we've done is we started presenting the budget in December, but about 2 weeks early, so 2 weeks before the budget itself is adopted, to again give residents the opportunity if they have any feedback to share with us. So with that, I will move on to the next slide. So here's, again, a bit of the background. So we'll start with the purpose of the public consultation. We'll explain a bit on the timeline and principles. Oh, sorry. I have to, it's good that I'm reminded to share my screen. Thank you. So in terms of the agenda, again, so we talked about we'll be talking about more about the purpose, the timeline and guiding principles. Then our Director of Finance will talk a bit about the operating budget. Then we'll talk a bit about the capital budget, which is a bit more exciting in terms of priorities and to try to get your feedback. We'll talk about how some of the ways that we are sharing information. And again, we'll take suggestions from residents and those watching. So in terms of the purpose, again, this is to give residents a chance to get a better understanding of the budget. There are some items that are more discretionary where we have options, some are less. So again, it gets you a sense of what goes into the budget, to get feedback in terms of how we allocate some of those items, especially again, in terms of the discretionary budget. Priorities for capital investments. Do residents want us to spend more money on parks? Should we be spending more money on roads, on dealing with the lead pipes that we have in the city? So this is a chance to get some feedback and also to get a sense as to how you want the information shared with you about the budget. We've done different formats. We've shared, of course, as PDF. We've shared as Excel format also. So those who are more into numbers can actually go through it. We share also the financial statements from the government. So you get a copy of those as well. So it's, again, an opportunity to get your feedback on that. Ici, c'est un calendrier du processus budgétaire. Alors, on peut voir, on est maintenant en mois de mai-juin. C'est la révision des prévisions budgétaires. Dans les prochains mois, on va déterminer les principes pour le budget. En mois d'août et septembre, c'est le temps pour les prévisions salaires et les contrats. Septembre-octobre, on va avoir les budgets des départements. En novembre, c'est le temps d'examiner les projets d'investissement et les plans quinquennaux. Et aussi, c'est le temps de présenter le budget au conseil. Cette année, il va y avoir une élection. Alors, le temps vont peut-être être ajusté un peu. En novembre, on fait la prévision des taux de taxes municipales. Cette année, il va y avoir un nouveau rôle d'évaluation foncière. Alors, ça va peut-être changer quelque chose, mais on va vous informer au mois de septembre, au mois d'octobre, en termes de nouveau rôle d'évaluation. Et dernièrement, le budget sera adopté au mois de décembre. Et juste pour vous avertir, normalement, quand c'est une élection, le budget s'est adopté quand même en décembre, mais ça arrive des fois que c'est seulement adopté en janvier. C'est à cause du parti de Côte-Part qui vient de l'agglomération. Alors, ça arrive des fois que Montréal est un peu en retard. Alors, on va vous informer encore plus d'informations au mois de décembre. In terms of the guiding principles, and I'll just mention, je vais faire une partie en français, une partie en anglais, but feel free to ask any questions. Vous pouvez demander des questions en anglais ou français. So in terms of our guiding principles, so these are the principles so far. These are still being adjusted, but generally these will be the ones that we will go with. So of course, finding a balance between revenue and expenses, making sure that property tax revenue increase while minimizing the additional burden on taxpayers. So we look at how to adjust the roll each year, and especially that we do things like rolling the tax or extending the tax roll over 3 years. Looking at sustainability programs or services. So it's one thing to start a program, but we want to make sure that it can survive for many years. We also look at external funding opportunities in terms of provincial government and federal government grants. We look at looking at our funding sources, so in terms of borrowing money and the cost of debt service. I guess over the last few years, interest rates have been up and now are starting to come back down again, which is a good thing. So we want to keep that in mind. We try when possible to hold off on borrowing. So when I started, about 20 years ago, we used to borrow the money quite early. So we'd end up paying interest over a longer period of time. So now we hold off on the borrowing to try to save funds and not waste money on extra interest rates. We also try to borrow from ourselves in terms of the working fund, which is basically where we have a fund set aside for sort of smaller or medium-sized projects, generally ones that can be done within a year or two. And there, because we're borrowing from ourselves, we pay no interest. And again, in terms of I guess one of the other core or guiding principles is looking at what we call our core business, or what makes Côte Saint-Luc, and deciding that. And this is an exercise we've done over the last few years to try to make sure we were keeping in mind the services residents need and expect from us. And finally, in terms of efficiency and transparency, in terms of the budget building process. And again, the goal sessions like today are to share with residents what goes on behind the scenes so they get a better understanding. And I won't mention any specific neighbors, but I'll mention, I know there's talk about other cities, but I can tell you in Côte Saint-Luc, we do our best to make sure to share information and be as open and transparent as possible. Keep going. So in terms of other factors or external factors, the biggest one that is unpredictable is the agglomeration Côte-Part. So as I mentioned, we usually only find out in November, December. This year, it was a 3.2% increase, which is minimal, but we've had years where it's been a 15% increase. So you can imagine it's not an easy one to deal with. The real estate market, I guess it was 2 years ago, the welcome tax total was about 2.5, 3 million. Last year was about 8 million. This year we're about 1 million so far. We're hoping that'll increase, but again, we never know until the year is over, and we hope, of course, the real estate conditions will stay the same. Climate change, we're dealing with more swings. This year in February, we had 2 back-to-back snowstorms, each over 40 centimeters, which I think is the first time in the history of Montreal we've had 2 so close. And already we just had an audit committee meeting earlier, and we're already looking at an overage. We're looking to be over budget for snow removal for the year, even though we're not even halfway through, but we're already predicting to be over budget. Right now, we're in the middle of a heat wave, so we're incurring extra expenses in terms of that. In terms of public tender, in terms of capital projects, we try to go to tender as early as possible, but you never know until the bids are in. Water infrastructure, our water mains and water infrastructure is aging. We've done sleeving about 25% of the pipes in Côte Saint-Luc, but it means, of course, there's still 75% that have not been done. We're also dealing with inflation rate. tariffs imposed by the US, which is a new one. This is a new factor we added just recently. Interest rates, which again are up and down. Demographics and lifestyle changes. Our goal is to make sure to continue meeting the needs of our residents that are older, but also young families, which is what we want to try to attract to Côte Saint-Luc and make sure to really be an intergenerational city. And finally, the technological trend. We've integrated new software, for example, into recreation. We're looking at ways to make sure residents get better customer service in terms of requests of a burnt-out streetlight or pothole to make sure that we're up to date. All these come with additional costs. In terms of local versus agglomeration, or local versus Côte-Part services. So on the city side, of course, we have the administration, public works, our road and water infrastructure, which again is all the pipes that are under the city. Waste management, we deal with the collection and transport. The agglomeration or the central city deals actually with the treatment. And I had a chance to visit the treatment site for the organic waste collection recently, but I'll share that story another day. Public safety and security, recreation, library, the ACC, and debt service. And our goal in terms of debt services is to try to keep the debt as low as possible. We've slowly been paying down the debt as much as we can over the last few years and trying to borrow less and less. And on the central city side, of course, we have the police, the fire, the municipal courts, the evaluation. And as I mentioned previously, the new evaluation role will be coming out in September. So we'll share more information with residents at that point. And depending on how big the swing is, either we'll just send out through, let's say, through the internet, but if needed, we'll have a public consultation or public meeting to go over that as well. Public transport is part of the central city services, so that's the STM and the metro. Water treatment, so we deal with the local pipes, but the water treatment itself and distribution is done through the central city. 911, social housing, although this is something we're looking to provide more of for Côte Saint-Luc. And finally, the CMM services, which is the Communauté Métropolitaine de Montréal. Some of their services are also covered through the agglomeration. And now we're going to move to, one more. So in terms of operating versus capital, so I'll just mention, so the operating budget is basically an annual budget we do each year. It's from January 1st to December 31st. We do revisions. Actually, we're just right now working on a revision for the end of May, and we'll do the September 30th. And this is to get a sense in terms of making sure we're on budget. I was just mentioning we should be at this point around 47, 48% of the year, which we're pretty good at being on for virtually all the budgets. And the capital budget, this is usually done as a 5-year plan. We used to focus more on 3 years, but we've tried to go 5 years and even beyond in terms of our thinking. So these are for larger projects, things like roads, buildings, vehicles. And this is something we do also every year, continuously update. And I would say this is where we have a bit more flexibility. And this is where, again, especially we'd like to hear from residents in terms of their priorities. Like I said earlier, in terms of roads versus sidewalks versus parks and so on. And this is something we'll talk a bit about later on in the presentation. So with that, with that, I'll pass the microphone over to our Director of Finance and Treasurer, Angelo Marino, who will talk a bit about the operating budget.
Good evening. Thank you, Steven. So just the graph kind of says it all, right? The objective here is to look at how much money is generated to be able to cover the expenses. So the goal is always to have a balanced budget. We look at how much money is coming in. Therefore, we'll decide how that money goes out to ensure that it's balanced at the beginning of the year. Just to put things into a little bit of context, like Councillor Erdelyi mentioned before, we do spread the roll over 3 years. The last roll that was deposited was 2023, 24, and 25. So this is the last year of the roll. The last time the roll increased significantly by 38.9% in Côte Saint-Luc, a little bit more than the average for the city of the island of Montreal, which was 37.8. So that does affect the contribution that we have to make for the cut-off for the city of Montreal. 2026 will be the first year of the next roll. We're expecting that it wouldn't be as high as it was the last time, but until September, we won't have any more information at this point. The last thing, the other significant revenue that we have is transfer duties. And that's sales of properties throughout the year. It's known as the welcome tax that everybody's familiar with. And we have a budget in the current year of about $3 million. Ici, c'est l'augmentation des taux de taxes que vous voyez depuis 2016. On essaie toujours de rester en bas de l'inflation qu'on voit dans le budget de la Ville de Montréal. Dans les trois années 2023, 2024, 2025, on voit qu'il y a de l'augmentation plus élevée que l'inflation. C'était à cause de l'agglomération qui a augmenté en 2023 de 15,5 % à partir de Côte Saint-Luc. En 2024, de 5,5 % et en 2025, 3,2 %. Même si on essaie de couper les dépenses locales, c'est impossible de rester dans le taux d'inflation pour l'année. The next slide is just an idea of the revenues that we generate. So the total revenues we generated in 2025 related to tax was 77 million. And part of that is the amount that we collect for the agglomeration that's returned back to the city of Montreal into installments of 38 million, leaving $39.6 million left for the city of Côte Saint-Luc's activities. We also have local improvement tariffs and city services of 175,000. Compensation for in lieu of taxes. Those are properties that are owned by either the provincial or federal government. User fees, rentals, permits, $3.2 million. Transfer duties, like I mentioned, $3 million. And then we do generate significant grants in the operating budget. In 2025, we're estimating it to be almost $4.5 million. And then all other revenues are a total of $2.4 million, giving a total revenue source of $54.6 million in 2025. So this is just a graph showing what the compensation would look like or what the revenues look like for the particular year, 2025. So we said that we're not going to ask these questions, right? Okay, so we will then launch the first question. No, we will not launch the first question. Okay. Okay, so you can also provide your feedbacks. We will not take a poll actually this evening, but we ask that you provide your feedback based on the questions that are in the presentation. You could always send your response to finance@cotesaintluc.org. So the first question would be, in order to ensure that the city raises significant revenues to cover the 2026 expenses, how would you prioritize the following options to generate the revenues? A would be to increase general taxes. So we estimated 2 to 4%, increase user fees for various programs, or increase permit costs and other administrative charges. So on the operating expense side, the city always wants to ensure that all residents have the opportunity to take advantage of services that are offered by the city. We also know that, as Councillor Erdelyi said before, that the agglomeration, which is a significant amount in our operating budget, is very unpredictable and has been increasing more than the cost of inflation. So in 2025, it was $38.1 million. We also add new programs on an annual basis that we always have to take into account in our budget. And then the goal is always to try to keep the tax rate increase below the cost of inflation. Alors, vous voyez ici la partie dépenses locales, ça représente 58,94 % comparé les dépenses agglomération, qui est 41,06 %. Just a little bit to explain the non-discretionary compared to discretionary expenses. So the majority of our budget is actually fixed. So it's under the non-discretionary expense, which is also known as the fixed costs. So usually we have service contracts or negotiated agreements with different organizations, including our employees, on the amount of money that we would have to spend in a given year. Many times these are predictable, but often they're not. Sometimes there is the percentage increase in the contract, and other times it's based on inflation, which is not always known. And then there are some examples of what some of the fixed costs can include. The biggest one would be remuneration, employer contribution, other service contracts, the snow removal contracts, building equipment maintenance, insurance, interest expense, capital reimbursement, depreciation, and utility costs. The agglomeration and the CMM apportionment are also non-discretionary. Therefore, they're fixed in our budget and they're unpredictable. So it's very difficult for us to determine until we get the amount from the City of Montreal and the CMM, how much it would represent. And then the last type of expense would be the discretionary one that's a little bit more flexible. So we often refer to it as the variable cost, and often it's based on programming needs and historical spending. Some examples of variable costs would include something like Canada Day or events that we've had recently, meals, telephone, postage, contributions that we make to different organizations, professional development, and then some unforeseen. So to break down the expense by type of expense, you have this graph. Alors, la partie qui est rémunération et les charges sociales de l'employeur, elle représente 51,43%. So it represents the biggest part of our local budget of 51.43%. The service contracts represents 21%. Les matériaux et les biens, 7,89%. Le coût de financement, ça c'est la partie qui est les intérêts et les remboursements de dette, 14,15%. Les affectations, c'est moins d'1%. Et tous les autres, 4,31%. So you'll see the graph here based on the department now instead of the type of expense, where the city council, administrative costs, the biggest one you'll see is public works. I don't have the percentages. I should have printed the percentages, but you can see it on the graph that public works represents roughly $14 million compared to, let's say, recreation, which is just less than $10 million. Debt and appropriations, close to $9 million. So the next question, again, we're not going to launch the survey, but if you do want to send us some feedback, you can send it to finance@cotestluc.org. So what services would you prioritize in the 2026 budget? Would be A, for maintenance and facilities and parks, B, for library and culture, C, for public safety, that includes EMS and public security, D, for public works, that's road, park maintenance, waste, and snow, and then E, recreation and ACC programs. Alors, la prochaine question, c'est de l'autre sens. S'il faut réduire les dépenses en 2026, quelle est-ce que vous choisissez? Alors, c'est les mêmes réponses. A, pour l'entretien des installations des parcs. B, bibliothèque et culture. C, sécurité publique. D, travaux publics. Ou E, programme de loisirs.
Thank you, Angelo. And thank you, Director Marino. So now I'll continue with a bit of background on the capital investment 5-year plan for 2025 to 29 and priorities for 2026. And I'll just mention, so the way it works, we adopt each year a 5-year plan. And obviously we're looking at all 5 years. Obviously we're always focused on the year ahead. So for example, in December, when we adopted the budget for the current year, we were looking at the 5-year plan. The focus then was on 2025. Right now, we're thinking about 2026. And I'll just mention as I flip into the next slide. So right now, the number is quite high, but we're, so that will not necessarily be the actuals, but this is just to give you a sense as to where we're at right now. So the big headings. So for 2026, you can see the big headings are infrastructure, so about $9.5 million. Building and local improvement, about 4.3, vehicles, machinery, and heavy equipment, about 771,000, IT equipment, about 350,000, and other just under 100,000. And I'll just give a bit more of a breakdown. So first I'll continue just with some of the sources of funding. So again, the total is about 15 million. We expect to get about $2 million in federal provincial grants, and there'll be more money coming in over the next few years, partly through the tech grant or the TCQ, which is the gas tax. So we should be getting about $11 million over the next few years, but we haven't finalized all the paperwork. Other sources of funding, we have about 400,000, and transfer from the cumulative surplus about 500,000. And that's something you may see more of. For example, this year, most of that or much of that was for the parks or small park projects. It's something we may look into over the next few years, again, to try to borrow less money. So the total cost of the city right now is about $12 million, but this will end up being lower in the end. So these were some of the priorities for the current year for 2025, and in a moment, I'll talk about the priorities for 26. So for 25, one of the big ones is road resurfacing and sidewalk repair. So as I previously mentioned, we had been focusing for many years on the water pipes, and I'll mention something that I see the city of Montreal do often that always bothered me is they would repave a road and then a year or two later dig it up and redo the pipes underneath. And I'd be wondering, well, why would they go to the trouble and spend all that money to resurface the road and then do the pipes later? So for several years, we focused on the pipes and we tried to do as many as we could. And I would say the last few years, we're still doing some pipes, but the focus is more on resurfacing or repaving the road. We're looking at conduits and new electrical wires for streetlights. So over the last year, we've I would say, switched about 1,000 of our streetlights to LEDs. And every year, we're going to continue this project. In total, the city of Côte Saint-Luc has about 3,000 streetlights, so it's still going to take some time, but we're going to get there within a few years. Every streetlight will be LED. The other focus again on parks, or the other focuses have been on parks and public spaces. For our city hall, there's a library retaining wall just in the back of the building that had to be repaired. The bridge and the plaza in the front will have some work. We're working on this summer replacing the existing electrical panel at Public Works Garage, partly because it was out of date and partly to set the stage for a future which is coming where we're going to have more and more electric vehicles in the public works fleet. So we want to make sure we are future-proofed and replenishing the public works and public safety vehicles, including, again, more electric vehicles, which in the long run will actually save the city money, just from a financial point of view. En termes des investissements par activité pour l'année 2025, pour cette année, alors, pour l'infrastructure routière, c'est à peu près 5 millions de dollars. Les feux de circulation, c'est à peu près demi ou 500 000. Les parcs et terrains de jeu, un peu plus de 1 million de dollars. Les immeubles et améliorations locales, encore aussi plus de 1 million de dollars. Les véhicules et machinerie et équipements, c'est à peu près 700 000. Et l'équipement du bureau, les meubles et les autres, c'est à peu près 300 000 à 400 000 dollars. In terms of the priorities for 2026, so again, the goal is to continue with road resurfacing, and as mentioned, we'll be applying for the TECQ or tech grant, which is a grant that comes from the federal provincial governments for gas tax. Also doing more sewer repairs and pipe repairs or sleeving. And I'll just mention the sleeving, what it does is it adds an inner layer inside the pipe that adds an extra 25 to 50 years to the life of the pipe. One of the big projects that is coming, and we're still waiting or still trying to get more accurate pricing, is the Côte Saint-Luc underpass. So just to share with residents, and this is an underpass I pass by at least twice a day on my way to and from work, and many times, on the weekends and so on. The underpass is in need of repairs. Half of the underpass roughly is in Montreal, half is in Côte Saint-Luc. So this is a joint project. For this work, Montreal is taking the lead because it is quite a big project. And it involves not just repairs to the actual overpass portion, but the pedestrian sections as well. And this too I've seen for many years. Damage to the railing of the pedestrian portion where part of the railing is actually extending over the side of the road, so that needs to be repaired. It's still safe, but we want to make sure it gets done shortly. So we're waiting on the final pricing, but this will be a large project, one of the largest infrastructure projects in the city of Côte Saint-Luc's history, certainly in the recent history. We're looking to replace some traffic lights. Again, the conduits and new electrical wires for streetlights, which is something we're continuing to do. More work on park and public spaces. And one of the focuses of the council has been especially on small parks, where we found, sometimes we could do a renovation, $1 million, $2 million renovation in a bigger park, and it could have the same impact as a $20,000 renovation on a small park, where it's much more noticeable and it really meets the needs of the local residents. So we're trying to find the balance between the larger and the smaller parks, and that's something the Public Spaces Committee is really focused on. In terms of the public works building envelope, this is something that has been an issue, so we're working on that. The next one is the Caldwell tennis and pickleball courts. So the courts are need to have some upgrades, and we're looking to integrate more pickleball courts, because I have yet to play, but I know I have many friends and colleagues who are very into pickleball, and this is the summer I will try it out. I actually bought myself a pickleball racket. Replacement of the annex roof. So this is the annex behind the arena, and again, working on replenishing our public works fleet. I would say it's something we've done that's, I'll just take a pause to mention. It's something that I think has really benefited the city in the long run. It's not something that's seen every day, but I'll give a simple example. When it comes time to let's say when we have those big snowstorms, such as we had in February, it means there's less downtime. If I think back, 5-10 years ago, where for those who have lived in Côte Saint-Luc a long time, if you recall some of the old snow blowers that still had that greenish turquoise color, that were 20, 30, 40 years old, they were often going down, and they would be spending more time in repairs. And when a snowblower went down, it meant a whole team was sitting around basically twiddling their thumbs, waiting for that snowblower to be repaired. And it took us a lot more time to clear the snow off the street. So having a good set of equipment, a good base in terms of the fleet, helps us to make sure to maintain the services. So this is the plan again, split down by activities. So for roads and sidewalks, just over 8 million. Again, this is preliminary. Traffic lights, just over 1 million. Parks and green spaces, about 500,000. Building and local improvement, about 4.5 million. Vehicles and heavy machinery, about 700,000-800,000, and other equipment, about 400,000. So in terms of the next few years, so this is what we're looking at. So again, road resurfacing is one of our top priorities. Continuing in terms of the sleeving project, looking at the traffic lights, in particular, the traffic lights on Cavendish, looking at the traffic lights on our main streets. The Côte Saint-Luc underpass repairs, like I said, which is going to be one of our largest infrastructure projects. The Trudeau Park lake renovations. This is one that we've sort of kicked the can down the road, so to speak. But the Trudeau Park lake or pond is leaking water. And basically there's some issues with the actual base or basin. So this needs some major repairs. So we're looking into different options, but this is one that will be discussed more with residents, and we're open to your feedback. The Côte Saint-Luc Tennis Club, in terms of the tennis club building, is one that is in need of renovation. Again, the public works yards, more emphasis on small parks and library renovations, where every few years we need to continue to invest money in the library. Cool. And I'll pass it off to Angelo.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next section will just deal slightly with how we set the priorities in the capital budget. So we have established a set of priority rules that we put in place. The very first one is that every department that has a project must submit a business case. So the business case details the project, the cost, the timeline, and the priority, and if there's any effect on the operating budget, that could be a savings, like LED lighting could be an example, where there could be electricity savings as part of the project. Then the way that we do it is we triage all the business cases and we set them by priority. The highest priority is always given to a project that's got a grant attached to it, or it's either legal or health and safety obligations that the city has. The second priority is given for professional services for projects that are going to take place either the next year or the following year. And the reason why we do this is that getting professionals to start working on the project will allow us to get a better idea of how much the project will cost. And then the third priority is roads, sidewalks, parks, green spaces, and all other projects. So like Councillor Erdelyi mentioned before, we used to have a 3-year plan, but in order to be more efficient in the way that we do things, we felt that a longer term plan would be much better. So we created a 5-year capital investment plan a few years ago. Just to give an idea of some of the costs associated to these projects. So road resurfacing, currently we're paying $400 per meter squared, per square meter. And then there's also a charge for the professional services that we have. We estimate it to be 10%. Sometimes it could be a little bit more. So it's approximately $440 per meter squared. So to give an idea of an example of a street, a road that has about 2,400 square meters, it would cost about $900,000. Similar, if you look at the sidewalk reconstruction, there it's 360 square meters. And then we normally spend $600,000 to $800,000 a year, and we're looking at spending $700,000 next year. Traffic lights, we're forecasting to spend about $500,000 next year, and we do try to spend on an average $500,000 per year. So in the next couple of years, it is in the plan to do so. Same thing with the street lights. This is a long-term project that we have, and we're estimating to spend just over $300,000. Renovations in the parks. So these are usually smaller projects in parks, updating playground equipment, installing fences, benches, and so on. We're estimating to spend roughly $500,000 over the next number of years. And then you see some of the other projects, tree planting, city vehicles, and IT equipment as well. So in order to pay for these capital projects, the city normally has to borrow some money. And we've been trying, we have a policy in place that says that we have to keep our debt service costs in the operating budget below 15%. We've been successful in doing so over the last number of years. I think over the last number of years, we've been 14% or less. But we still have to borrow every year. So we borrow roughly $6 million a year to pay for the capital projects, in addition to the revenues that we generate either through grants or money that we take from surplus. So in order to do that, there is a cost that comes with it. Just to give you an idea of our current long-term debt, it's roughly $50 million, and it's been consistent at $50 million since 2017. So the question that we ask, and again, you can answer the question if you send your response to finance@costsaintluc.org. It's in order to keep our long-term debt repayment below 15%, often we have to decide on projects that we would like to do in 1 year. We have to amortize them over a longer period of time. But do you think that the city should increase the tax that we generate every year by 1 or 2% and generate additional costs for sidewalk and road repairs or other infrastructure projects? So A for yes or B for no. And then the last slide, I believe, that we wanted to show is just information that we have on the city website. So there is a section that's called Budget and Financial Statements on the city website that does share information about the budget. So you have the details of the operating budget, the presentation that's done in December, and then the information that's mailed to every household. And there's also information there on capital projects. And then just want to know your feedback here as well. Is there more information you'd like to see on the website, or do you feel that the information that we post is enough for you to be able to understand the city's finances?
Well, I'll just add a few thoughts. Well, first of all, thank you, Director Marino, for all your time. Well, not just to prepare the presentation, but really we are so lucky to have Angelo as part of our team. I'll just mention I'll speak to our Director of Communications, see maybe we can do like an online survey or online, like I was going to say a Google form, but a Microsoft form, so that you can answer as well in that format. But I guess the point is, and let me stop sharing. Oh, am I no longer sharing? Hmm? Oh, okay. So we're no longer, I was going to say what what I would say is the goal is to get your feedback. Often residents come out when it's something, it's that not in my backyard approach. There's a tall building that's being built just behind them, or they're worried about the traffic on their street. But they don't necessarily come forward when it's a bigger citywide issue or an issue of budgets and spending. So this is a time to hear from residents. Do you think we should be spending more on road repairs, or should we be spending more on parks? Should we be spending more on dealing with the lead pipes in Côte Saint-Luc? We know that we have many homes, including my own, where the level of lead was conforming with the government standards until about 2020, when the government changed the level from 10 parts per billion to 5. My house was kind of somewhere in the middle. We were at about 9 parts per billion. So we were conforming. We no longer are. We use a lead filter every day when we drink water. Is that something we should be spending more time and focusing our efforts on? Although we do have a grant for residents who purchase filters that you can get $50 back. But again, the point is we want to hear from you in terms of where you think our focus should be. What should the priority be? So this is your opportunity, especially now, and there's an election time. So it's good. It's I guess my hope for my fellow councillors as they're going door to door, and for potential candidates running, to hear feedback from residents so we can continue to meet the needs of the residents. And like I said, if it's parks that we want more money to be spent on, well, let us know. If it's roads, if it's infrastructure, if it's public security, it's something I'll just mention, we've increased the spending for public safety over the last few years. Now, the goal is to do all this while at the same time, as Treasurer Marino mentioned, to keep the tax rate in line with inflation. And just mentioning again, the last unknown is the new evaluation role, which is coming out in September. And it's not just, I'll mention, not just what's important is the increase, but it's how our increase compares to the increase for the island Montreal. And for residents, it's how your increase compares to the average in Côte Saint-Luc. If your increase is high, but you're below the average for Côte Saint-Luc residents, then you're actually in a better situation. If your average is higher than, or if your amount or increase is higher than the average for Côte Saint-Luc residents, then you'll end up paying more taxes. That's how it works. But obviously we won't know until September. What we do, like I said, we'll be sharing more information. So with that, I guess we'll sign up. I'll just thank Treasurer Marino. And like I said, if you want, you could reach out to me personally or email us at finance@cotesaintluc.org with feedback and your thoughts. Thank you. Merci.